I'll say this off the bat, this is not a fluffy romance. This is not a story where you are going to see them as a couple at all. At all. Hi everybody, welcome back to The Wonder of Anime. I am your host, Lisa, and this is another installment of Danmei Fridays. This week, I am going to be talking about a series that I read, I think last month. I binged it in 2-3 weeks. This week, I'm going to be talking about the Danmei series Soul Vibration by Dr. Solo. It is a 3-book series about a artist named Chi Nan, who is a personal assistant to his favorite artist of all time, Salinger, who's part of a band called Lotus. I found the story through Via Lacti, which is a distributor of Danmei, and they have both physical books and they also have ebooks. And I got all 3 ebooks for this series. I got the first one and I was like, let me just test it out. And then as soon as I got the first one, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like this series. I ended up buying the 2nd and 3rd volumes. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on this. Now, this is an unscripted video. You guys see my content. It's like a mix of both scripted and unscripted. But similar to my Salad Days videos, I read this story just because I wanted to read it. I didn't go with it with the intention of I'll make content about it. And I just, every time I sat to take notes, I was like, I kind of just want to free talk about this series and what I enjoyed about it and what I didn't like. Similar to what I did in Salad Days, I'll talk about the ebooks themselves. So when it came to this series, this is another one that I had read some reviews on the Danmei subreddit, but I didn't read any reviews about the story itself, just about the translation issues and the typos and the errors. Now, I will say this came out a couple of years ago. So some of the reviews were right when this series was coming out on Via Lacti, and there were a lot of reviews that there are a lot of typos in the 2nd and 3rd volume. Since then, there have been corrections made, but I will say and I said this in my Salad Days videos, I'm someone who is bilingual. So I read, write, and speak both in Spanish and English. And I'm not a stickler for translation always. As long as I can read it and understand it, and it's not horrible, abysmal, machine translations, I'm not usually too upset. Typos, I feel are a little bit more annoying because you would expect in a book process, somebody is translating it and then there are, it goes through multiple people to get, edited and make sure the grammar is correct and typos and things like that. Grammar, for me, I'm not the biggest grammar police, but typos, I will say that can be a little bit annoying, especially if you are paying for something. You would think okay, I would want this to be better quality. All that to say, by the time that I am reading these stories in 2025, I didn't find as many typos as people were initially saying when these came out a couple of years ago. And I did learn that Via Lacti, let them know about typos. They will go in and they'll update the ebook so that you're downloading it the most reviewed version of it. So the first volume, I will say, didn't notice any typos. The 2nd volume and the 3rd volume, I will say the quality definitely did go down. I found that the formatting was just not the same. The formatting in the 1st volume is every chapter is on its own page, so you can scroll in between them. The 2nd and the 3rd volume, I felt they were rushed. There was a lot of typos that I even took screenshots. I have to email because it does say if you find typos, email us. So I did take screenshots with things circled, just words are repeated. I think there were sentences that just don't end. I don't know. That to say, it was annoying, but not enough to take me out of the story. Not enough that I'm I can put this down and I can't read this. This is unreadable. I was able to get through it, especially because I was so invested. By the time the 2nd volume comes, I was so invested in the story. I needed to know what happened. But I did just want to point that out, that if you are getting the ebook versions, the 2nd and 3rd volume, I feel the quality is definitely lower, and it's not consistent as to what it was in that first volume. Now that we got all that technical book stuff out of the way, let's get into the story and what I liked about the story and all that good things. The story follows Chi Nan, who is a musical artist. He is obsessed with the band Lotus, that is his dream band, and specifically the bass guitarist Salinger. Chi Nan plays music. He's taught himself basically everything he knows, and he's really gone from like a basement artist, finally getting to a place where he is able to get into the music industry and like starts his own music career. Finally gets to this point, and unfortunately, he discovers that he is losing his hearing in both ears and has a possibility of going deaf, or will go deaf in due time. This is obviously devastating, and he starts, I believe, right when it gets to the part of him about to be the personal assistant, he completely loses hearing in one of his ears and only has hearing in the other, and that's slowly going to deteriorate, especially if he continues doing music. It gets to the point where he gets his dream job and immediately is like taken out of it due to like this whirlwind situation, because it's the same record label where Lotus and Salinger's at. Salinger, who has known about him as an artist, knew him from like a previous competition show, is like, I'll make you my personal assistant and I'll buy those tracks so that the record label doesn't own them anymore. And that is how Chi Nan starts working for Salinger. So the story itself, I'll say this off the bat, this is not a fluffy romance. This is not a story where you are going to see them as a couple at all. At all. The entire 3 volumes, save for maybe the last 20, 30 pages of the 3rd volume, is all Chi Nan's point of view. And it's all him as he is a personal assistant to the band, him getting closer to Salinger, them working on music together, him with the band touring, all of that. And him dealing with that, like separating himself as a fanboy who has idolized this man for a huge part of his life, to then recognizing like, oh, I am falling in love with him as a man and not just as a fanboy, but I will never be with him in any type of capacity. And I'm just going to just be here as a personal assistant until I can't hear anymore, and then I won't be of use to him. That is the whole story. As you are watching like the Chi Nan, like him and his journey through the band, you see through his eyes the interactions that he's having with Salinger. And as the reader, you can tell that Salinger is falling in love with this man. Salinger has a special interest in this man. But because Chi Nan is so like, 1, a fanboy, but 2, also falling in love with him, he will not accept that Salinger's behavior is anything other than like, working with someone that I admire musically. He will not accept that Salinger is acting like out of love, out of, you know, any type of feelings. And that is, as a reader, I thought that was very interesting, like reading a story like this where you know the guy is falling for him, but he doesn't know that. And it isn't until the 3rd volume at the end when then there's like the confession and it's like, oh, hey, like we'll be together, wrap this up in a bow. And then there's a couple bonus chapters in Salinger's perspective. But the whole 3 volumes is not some romantic story that you're going to get out of this. There's a lot of interactions between them, especially when they're writing music and they're working on songs together, and how highly Salinger thinks of Chi Nan. And that, you know, definitely had me blushing and kicking my feet and really liking the story. But aside from that, it's not this heavy romance. I feel like it's a story about a band with hints of romance, but it's still very interesting, and I thought it was very enjoyable. I ended up binge reading it because I was like, okay, what is gonna happen? Like, Salinger definitely likes this guy. When is Chi Nan gonna notice? And Chi Nan does not notice till the end, and even when he's just in disbelief. To me, the bigger and more interesting part was Chi Nan dealing with the fact that he's going deaf. And this doesn't make anything. I was gonna get emotional, but it makes me a little bit emotional for him. Like, the fact that he got to the point where he's going to accomplish his dreams and he starts going deaf. And that was so heart-wrenching for me, watching him deal with that. And I thought he handled it exceptionally well. And especially as someone who really, like, take the Salinger out of it, because, you know, Salinger was a big motivation for him to get into the music lane, and like fueled his music. Like, Chinan loved music, and he's so talented, and he's taught himself all these instruments, producing, arrangements, writing, all of that. And the fact that he got to it, he got there. He literally was at the front door wide open. And as soon as he's about to take that step in, this disease comes in and rips it out of his hands. That, to me, watching him grapple with that, watching him decide to do these final projects, knowing that he's going to lose his hearing, was amazing. It was just, I thought, I'm such an emotional crybaby, but I just thought that was so realistic to life. Like, sometimes you do everything right. You work so hard, and you get to a point where, like, you're almost there, and something completely out of your control happens and affects the way that, like you can't continue. You can't do this career, or you can't do the career the way you thought that you were going to be able to do it. It could be like a loss of a family member, a loss of a job, you know, a natural disaster. Like, so many people get to this point, and then they're not able to, like, get past the threshold and really meet their dreams. So that to me was, like, my favorite part of the story, is watching him deal with the fact that he's losing his hearing, and then deciding, like, you know what, like, I'm still going to do what I can. I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to move forward and just give it on my all. I lose my hearing in the process. I lose my hearing. And that, to me, was such a beautiful part of the story. Some of the things I did not like. So there's this particular arc in the story where Chinan meets this girl who is in the industry by way of being a dancer. And him and Salinger end up in this situation where they save the girl from a predator, basically. And this kind of happens at the end of volume 1. And then in volume 2, it ends up turning out that Salinger and the girl get together romantically. And this destroys Chinan. Like, and he can't understand. You as a reader know, but he can't understand, like, why he's so hurt about this, why he kind of feels like betrayed at this, but betrayed, like, by Salinger. And one of the things in the story is, like, Salinger is, like, the playboy of the band, and he's always getting into these romantic scandals that's making the band look bad and all that stuff. And this whole arc was so frustrating for me, because I'm like, Salinger, what are you doing? What are you doing with this girl? And from the interactions that Salinger has with Chinan, he is under the impression that Chinan romantically likes this girl. Chinan does not romantically like this girl. He feels for this girl because he kind of sees himself in her in some of the situations that she's going through, but he does not like this girl. We learn later on in the 3rd volume that the girl and Salinger were never romantically involved. They did not sleep together, although it did appear that way due to some actions. And then the whole reason that Salinger was with her in any capacity was to make her dreams come true, because he thought that's what Chinan wanted to do. Now, I get it. I get it on the level of, like, I understand that. This was stupid. I thought this whole thing was so stupid. I was so pissed off when it seemed like they got together. And I just felt like Salinger was moving so dumb. And he was like, I thought, like, if she accomplished her dreams, like, you would be happy, and then, like, she'd go away. What? Why even get involved with her? And that whole scandal just brought so much issues to the band. I was very annoyed. I was very, very annoyed. I thought that was annoying. But yeah, overall, I mean, those are kind of like complaints about it. Like, I felt like some parts kind of dragged on a little bit too long. I can see that, like, I get why it was 3 volumes. I can see this being 2. I feel like some of the technical, like, band specific things could have been cut down. This whole arc with this other girl did not need to happen. It's Chinan's story, right? And it's his perspective. And the whole time, he never imagines that Salinger could be in love with him. So it's not a romance story from his point of view, because like, yes, he's falling in love, but he doesn't think Salinger likes him or whatever like him. Like, you know, Salinger's straight. To his knowledge, he was straight too. So it's not told from this like romantic perspective, and you don't find out until the end like Salinger's thoughts. And the way you find out Salinger's thoughts, I feel like kind of was a little bit of a cheap cop out. It was like he wrote a letter to his bandmate and was like, in this moment I felt this, and then later on this other thing, and this is what I felt. And I get that, but if I could change something, I would want it to be dual point of view. And I would want it to be that they are interacting with each other. One chapter's Chinon, one chapter's Salinger. One chapter's like, I kind of would want something more like that. Or like one novel being Chinon's point of view and the other novel being Salinger's point of view. But like I said, I understand that this really, the romance is there, but this isn't a romantic story. This is a story about a man who's losing his hearing and is in love with his idol. But he is like dealing with all that, and the love is like, that is the secondary part. At least to me, that's the gist that I got with the story. Like, the love is there and that fuels him, but it's not about Salinger loving him back and them getting into a relationship. It's how his love for Salinger transformed his life, got him into this music career, and how he's dealing with the illness that's taking away his hearing while being on the cusp of living his dreams, and how he can continue to do music and push forward even though this devastating thing is happening to him. At least that is my interpretation of the story. I don't think I would reread this story, and I mentioned that because I reread everything. I just read a manga like 4 times because I loved it so much. I reread everything, and I really rate my enjoyability of things by if I would reread them. And I think this is a one and done story for me. This is a one and done story for me. It was good. It could have been better, but I still enjoyed it, and it was fun to read it. I did learn there is a manhwa adaptation of it. I'm not sure if that was ever completed, how far that went, if that kind of portrays the story a little bit different. I saw some of the art, but the art contradicts like the cover art of how the characters looked. And then I didn't like then that was like kind of confusing for me. And then this is how they look on in the cover of the books, and they're all like this. So the manhwa drawing, I don't know. I'll put a little picture, but it kind of threw me off, and I was like, I'm not sure if I like this. Overall, these are my thoughts on Soul Vibration. Is it worth the read? I think so. Will I read it again? No. Do I wish things were different? Yes. But I'm glad that they got a happy ending, and you know, it is what it is. I still enjoyed reading it. It's not a regret. I think if you go into it like wanting like this deep love story, you're not going to get that. But if you go in with no expectations, I think you're really going to walk out with a wonderful story about following your dreams and what to do when your dreams don't end up materializing the way that you think they will due to external factors. But thank you guys so much for checking out another one of my Danmei Friday videos. I am reading a bunch of stuff. I have a lot of videos coming on the horizon. Some may be more scripted, some may be like this where they're more free ranting. I hope you guys enjoy it. I would love to know your thoughts if you read Soul Vibrations in the comments of this video. But I hope you guys all have a wonderful time, and I will see you on the next one. Peace out.